You ever wonder why some democracies just work while others completely fall apart, even when they start with the exact same rulebook? Well, it turns out the answer isn't just in the laws or who wins an election. Nope. It's somewhere deeper, something hidden in the very mindset of a nation. Today, we're going to dive into a really cool idea that explains this, the political culture approach.
And to really wrap our heads around this, let's start with a puzzle. I'm talking about a real-world mystery that baffled political scientists for years and showed just how much they were missing about how countries actually succeed or fail.
Okay, picture this. It's 1947. Both India and Pakistan are born from the same colonial system. They have almost identical government structures, legal systems, the whole shebang. But then their paths split, and they split dramatically. India's democracy, against all odds, managed to survive and even thrive. Pakistan's? It was uprooted. The rule books were practically copies of each other, but the results were worlds apart. So what was the invisible difference? What was going on here? That one question, that single puzzle, really exposed a massive blind spot in the old way of thinking. See, for a long time, the focus was all on the formal stuff. Constitutions, laws, economic data. But that approach, as we're about to see, just kept hitting dead ends.
Some of the early theories, like this idea of political modernization, tried to create these universal checklists for what a successful country should look like. But just counting stuff up, like GDP or how many people had phones, it just couldn't explain the messy, human side of politics. The numbers, it turned out, just weren't telling the whole story.
And this chart illustrates that perfectly. Back in 1970, voter turnout in Sri Lanka was a whopping 85%. Meanwhile, in the US, it was often below 60. Now, if you just looked at the numbers, you'd probably think Sri Lanka was the more engaged, more stable democracy, right? But those kinds of metrics couldn't actually predict political stability or the real health of the system.
And that paradox, that realization that the numbers don't add up, led to this huge breakthrough. Scholars finally realized the missing piece wasn't in the rulebooks or the economic charts. It was something way more basic, the human factor. It was all about our beliefs, our attitudes, and our collective psychology.
Which brings us to a really powerful analogy that makes this all click. Think of a country's institutions, its courts, its parliament, all its laws, as a computer's hardware. It's essential, for sure, but it can't do a thing on its own. The political culture, well, that's the operating system. It's the software that tells the hardware how to run, how to process information, and ultimately what it can and cannot do.
So this realization caused this massive shift in focus. First, experts started looking beyond just the formal structures. Then, they began focusing on the attitudes and feelings of the actual people living inside those structures. And finally, that led to understanding the big picture, the whole psychological context, those subjective feelings and values that support the entire system.
And that brings us right to our core definition. Political culture is the psychological dimension of politics. It's that web of subjective attitudes, those deep-seated beliefs, and the shared values that give a political system its unique personality and really determine how it actually works in the real world. Okay, so if political culture is the operating system, then what writes the code, right? Where do these powerful, often unspoken rules even come from? Let's break down the core foundations that actually build a nation's political identity.
It turns out this operating system gets built over centuries by three really powerful forces. You've got a nation's history, its unique geography, and its socioeconomic structure. And each one of these leaves a permanent mark on the final code. First up, history. Just compare Britain, a country defined by slow, stable, gradual evolution, with France, whose modern identity was literally forged in revolution. Since 1789, France has had 16 different constitutions. That kind of history, one of constant upheaval, creates a totally different set of political attitudes than one of gradual, steady change. Next, let's talk geography. Britain, being an island, acted like a protective shield, right? It allowed for a really unique and stable political evolution, separate from all the chaos on the continent. Now, contrast that with the United States, this vast continent with seemingly endless resources and a constantly moving frontier that shaped a completely different culture of individualism, expansion, and opportunity.
And finally, you've got socioeconomic factors. You can see this tension inside almost every single nation. On one side, you have the bustling urban industrial centers. They create all these complex new demands and radical political ideas.
And on the other side, you have the rural, agricultural areas, which often hold on to conservatism and traditional values. That push and pull between these two forces is a constant engine shaping a country's politics.
So, look, this isn't just some dusty academic theory. Why is this so critical for us to get right now? Well, because if you want to make any sense of what's happening in the world, from international conflicts to the politics in your own backyard, you have to be able to read these unspoken rules.
So let's bring it all home. The biggest thing to remember is this: similar institutions do not guarantee similar results. Politics is fundamentally shaped by those deep-seated attitudes and beliefs we've been talking about, and this political culture is forged in the fires of history, geography, and economics. So ultimately, to truly understand a country, you can't just read its constitution. You have to understand its operating system.
And that leaves us with one final question to think about for yourself. What are the unspoken rules that govern politics where you live? Once you start looking for that hidden operating system, I promise you'll never see the world the same way again.